This is a mummy of a young man named Heraclides. He died in Egypt in the 1st century AD when he was about 20 years old. Mummification was developed by the ancient Egyptians to preserve the body for the afterlife. Typically, all internal organs were removed before mummification, with the exception of the heart. But in this case, the heart was removed and the lungs were left intact. Next, the body was covered with salt and left for about 40 days, until all moisture was eliminated. Perfumed oils and plant resins were rubbed on the body. Thick layers of resin were applied to glue the strips of linen that were wrapped around the body. The mummy was placed on a wooden board, and more wrappings bound them together. A mysterious pouch, perhaps of religious significance, was placed on the chest. A mummified ibis, a wading bird with a slender, down-curved bill, was placed on the abdomen. Ibis mummies commonly served as votive offerings to the gods, but this is an unusual case of a bird being mummified with a deceased human. Long linen strips further secured the wrappings. A portrait panel of Heraclides was placed over the face. A large linen cloth was wrapped around the mummy. The shroud was painted red with an imported lead-based pigment. This treatment is rare. Very few red shroud mummies are known to exist. Egyptian symbols of protection and rebirth were painted on the outer cloth with pigments and gold. Finally, Heraclides' name was written in Greek at the feet. Thanks to this remarkable mummification process, Heraclides' body is with us today.
Over 1,000 years before the birth of Christ, a young pharaoh died. His burial was carried out in a hurry, and his name would shortly be erased from the monuments he had built. All memory of his reign would soon be lost. He was to vanish from history for 3,000 years. His name was Tutankhamun. Tutankhamun was just 8 years old when he became king. These were dark times. His father had been a heretic, defying the traditional gods. Temples lay in ruins. The empire was under threat. Now Egyptians looked to the new pharaoh to return their land to greatness. He would have a new name. Tutankhamun was given to him after becoming king. It means the living image of Amun, in honor of the greatest of Egypt's gods. This sent a clear message. Egypt's ancient religion and culture would be restored. Tutankhamun's reign promised to be a glorious new beginning.
Who is Tutankhamun?
As pharaoh, Tutankhamun had to perform one vital task. He had to take a queen. Ankhesenamun was considered the perfect choice. She was his sister. An incestuous marriage would ensure that power remained within the family. It also suited Egypt's military leader, Ai, who effectively ran the country. He would have been keen to see that no other officials gained undue influence through marriage. To mark the dawn of a new era, Tutankhamun's government began the restoration of Egypt's great temples. But for the king, the most important new building work would be his tomb. First, a site had to be found in the Valley of the Kings. Ai himself may have selected it. He was probably familiar with the valley, having already started to build his own tomb here. It was essential for Tutankhamun's tomb to remain undisturbed if he was to have a successful passage into the afterlife. The plan was that beyond a concealed entrance, a tunnel would lead deep into the rock to a series of magnificent chambers, which would be filled with treasures for his final journey. Work on the tomb would be carried out in secrecy until the day of the pharaoh's death. For the young Tutankhamun, the need for a tomb must have seemed remote. But it was to prove more urgent than either he or his queen could have imagined. As soon as Tutankhamun was old enough, his queen was expected to produce a child. The future of Egypt depended on it. Without an heir, the empire could be flung into chaos on the death of the king. Incestuous marriage between royals might have made political sense, but producing a healthy child from a union between sister and brother was fraught with risk. But even dead babies were considered precious. They were of royal blood. Each was mummified for eventual burial with their father. For most of Tutankhamun's reign, the real power was wielded from behind the throne by a military council run by the young king's advisor, Ai. But when Tutankhamun reached the age of 18, he would have claimed his inheritance, to rule Egypt as a divine pharaoh. The king's newfound power would not last long. In his 10th year on the throne, Tutankhamun died. Exactly why remains a mystery. Some believe he was murdered by his own advisors, or perhaps he just had an accident. Examination of his body, using modern scientific techniques, showed a leg injury which could have been fatally infected. Tutankhamun was still a teenager. Tutankhamun's young widow, Ankhesenamun, had produced no heir, so the former advisor Ai now came to the throne. To cement his power, he married Tutankhamun's widow, probably another incestuous marriage. There is evidence that Ankhesenamun was Ai's own granddaughter. Tutankhamun had died, but his tomb was unfinished. Now a new site had to be found in a hurry. His body was probably placed in the tomb his chief advisor, Ai, had already built for himself. It was not designed for a king, but it could be made ready in time. Tutankhamun's coffin was placed inside a stone sarcophagus at the center of the burial chamber, to be surrounded by 4 gold-covered shrines, one within the next, each covered in sacred writings to protect the king on his journey. The small tomb was crammed with everything Tutankhamun would need in the afterlife. There were beds, chairs, couches, musical instruments, magical charms, chariots, jewelry, swords, daggers, shields, torches, cosmetics, and boats to carry him on his long journey. Tutankhamun was not buried with the care one might expect for a king. The golden coffin was too big, and part of it had to be sawn off to make way for the lid of the sarcophagus. Tutankhamun's final resting place was in a tomb built for a commoner.
Egypt, Valley of the Kings, November 4th, 1922. A young boy working for a British excavation team led by Howard Carter is riding his donkey home one night when suddenly the animal's hoof slips into a hole below the sand. Thinking he may have stumbled upon the entrance to a tomb, he rushes home and alerts Carter.
When Howard Carter came in, they dug feverishly all the way through the tomb, 72 steps, till they reached the sealed door of the tomb, which was right here. He instantly made a hole into the wall before destroying it, and Howard Carter peeked in and said, and I quote, "I see wonderful things," which was very true. Right inside King Tut's tomb, there were wonderful things. This tomb was packed with gold and treasures.
Incredibly, Howard Carter and his team had unearthed the tomb of King Tutankhamun. To this day, it is considered the best preserved and most intact tomb ever found in the Valley of the Kings.
happens a lot around here. So what's it say?
Amun-Ra, Amun-Day. It speaks of the night and of the day. Sueyaharum Hoktub sin mas ibet baya. Imatipin sumpike sitsue yatue yatue yatue.
No! You must not read from the book!
which many have attributed to the ancient curse of the pharaohs. Others still point to more practical reasons for these strange deaths, but the unsettling warnings of curses within the tombs themselves can be rather harrowing. Take for instance this curse discovered in an Old Kingdom era tomb. "Cursed be those who disturb the rest of a pharaoh. They that shall break the seal of this tomb shall meet death by a disease that no doctor can diagnose." Eerily, many people involved with the excavation of ancient tombs in Egypt have succumbed to strange diseases, or had previously diagnosed diseases flare up and claim their lives. Yet many say that these were nothing more than practical warnings that preyed on the superstition of ancient people. And if you're burying a dead guy in a room full of gold and wealth, it kinda makes sense to try and scare away any would-be tomb robbers. Carter himself was said to propagate the myth of an ancient curse in order to keep tomb robbers away after the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb. And yet none can deny the penetration of these sacred resting places, and the pilfering of their riches has indeed led to some very strange incidents. But what about actual death caused by ancient curses, or at least serious illness? For answers to those questions, we can turn to 9 of the most famous alleged victims of the curse of the pharaohs. George Herbert, or Lord Carnarvon, was the financier behind Howard Carter's expeditions to the Valley of the Kings, and one of the first men to enter the tomb of Tutankhamun after his 3,000-year rest. Months after the opening of the tomb, mysterious accidents had already plagued some of the workers involved with the original excavation, and already newspapers were running rampant with tales of ancient curses being linked to the ancient boy king's tomb. A few months after his entrance into Tutankhamun's resting place, Lord Carnarvon was shaving when he accidentally tore open a mosquito bite, which led to a blood infection. Days later, he was dead. Doctors attributing the death to pneumonia and a severe infection of the skin and underlying soft tissues. Immediately, the press jumped on the story, claiming that Tutankhamun had claimed revenge on the man responsible for his disturbance. Yet more level-headed individuals were quick to point out that Lord Carnarvon had always been prone to infections. A semi-invalid after a nearly fatal car accident in 1903, Lord Carnarvon was prone to frequent and severe lung infections, and it was generally believed that one severe bout of pneumonia could lead to his death at any time. Thus, critics of the ancient curse theory point out that the Lord's death was unfortunate but completely grounded in reality. Yet consider that many ancient Egyptian curses warn of death by disease, and while Hollywood would have us believe in ancient mummies coming back to seek their revenge, what if the curse of the pharaohs merely seals your doom by completely natural means? What if the ancient curse was nothing more than the slight nudging of Lord Carnarvon's razor blade, causing it to cut into the mosquito bite which would become infected? Or perhaps the curse was the prompting of the mosquito in the first place, directed to bite Lord Carnarvon. Prominent visitors to the tomb were all dead. Yet modern science points to a very possible explanation for most of the deaths. After the death of an American Egyptologist in 1995, American politicians ordered an investigation into the hazards that mummies may pose, and a subsequent scientific study showed that the mummies could carry several strains of deadly bacteria and mold, exactly the type of which that could severely affect someone with a weakened immune system, such as some of the victims of the 1920s curse. There's also the fact that the press had sensationalized the tales of a curse to such a degree that some of the more mentally unstable people involved in the excavation, such as Bethel and his father, may have legitimately linked their mental troubles to the curse. Lastly, and this one is one of the more interesting theories, is a recent publication by a historian studying famed Satanist Aleister Crowley's notes, who believes that the majority of the deaths were at the hands of Crowley himself. As a Satanist who took inspiration for his worship from ancient Egyptian deities, Crowley may have been deeply offended by the violation of Tutankhamun's tomb and sought to reap a revenge that could be attributed to the ancient curse the media was writing about every day. This historian links Crowley directly to several of the members who died as a result of the alleged curse, and the fact that they all happened in Crowley's home of London, England, lends great credence to the theory. Ultimately, we may never know if the curse of the pharaohs was real or just an imagined explanation for the mysterious and tragic deaths of Carter's team. It's easy to explain away superstitious talk of ancient curses, and it's likely that the deaths were nothing more than natural causes, or perhaps the murder spree of a Satanist fanatic. Yet one can't help but note how very strange it was for so many people directly linked with Tutankhamun's tomb to all die within years of each other.
Dr. Zahi Hawass is Egypt's General Secretary of the Egyptian Supreme Council of Antiquities and a world-renowned archaeologist.
The thinking of afterlife built ancient Egypt, built Egypt in my opinion. Without that, you will never see the pyramids. It is the belief on the afterlife who made everyone in ancient Egypt to work for the national project. The national project was building a pyramid or building a tomb. What's amazing about Tutankhamun that every year we know something new about this king. Scholars still studying. Sometimes scholars, Egyptologists, can decide the function of an object different from what we know. We just found recently in the desert of Akhmin, the tomb of his tutor, Sennacherib. I discovered the family of Tutankhamun with CT scan and DNA. We found even how he died, because all the people thought that King Tut was murdered. But we found out that that hole in the back was opened in Dynasty 18 to put the liquid for mummification. I am telling you, this golden boy never stopped. We always look at his
He is an icon of the ancient world, a symbol of Egyptian power. Tut was just 9 years old when he rose to the throne. To his people, he was half man, half god. But until his discovery, Tut was unknown. There is almost no record of his life anywhere in Egypt, except on the walls of his tomb. Somehow, his life ended abruptly. No one knows exactly why. Inside the Cairo Museum, scientists are preparing to scan the most famous mummy in the world. What really killed him? The evidence is locked inside his bones, specific clues to confirm or rebut the theories of King Tut's passing. We know there are 3 plausible explanations. First, the war wound. Evidence of multiple sharp injuries could mean he suffered fatal blows in combat. Second, the accident. The bows and arrows, spears, and half a dozen chariots in Tut's tomb show just how much he loved the hunt. Multiple fractures could mean that some kind of crash killed him. Or did he die in a more sinister fashion? Evidence of a single fatal blow might mean a murder. Now, as the body moves through the scanner, the machine generates more than 1,500 images. each one a potential solution to his mystery. The mysterious hole in the head is perplexing. It seems like the perfect murder clue, evidence of a spear to the base of the skull. But it's far more likely that it was drilled. The Egyptians think the embalmers did it. The proof? The embalmers left a trail. In the CAT scan, you can see embalming fluid dripping down inside the hole just as it was poured. This first analysis has rewritten Tut's story. But then they see something that appears irrefutable. It's a sharp break in Tut's left leg. When the CAT scans pull back to a surface view, they can see two critical details. The kneecap is missing. The skin near the fracture appears torn away. And that's consistent with a battle wound. So picture a young king. He finds himself face to face with a Hittite warrior. A powerful blow to the leg. Racked with pain, he lies broken on the desert sands. The onset of gangrene would emerge in only a few days, racking his body with fever, eventually stopping his heart. In the Valley of the Kings, the CAT scan machine has been shut down. The legendary Tut returns to his coffin, safe once more. 3 millennia after he died, his final secrets revealed, the Golden Pharaoh lives on.
Have passed since the discovery of Tutankhamun. Today, the sands of Egypt still hide many mysteries. Dr. Zahi Hawass is presently conducting his own archaeological expedition near the pyramids and the Valley of the Kings, where preliminary finds have revealed the entrances to 2 new tombs.
Over 26 tombs for kings existed in this place, and more than 37 tombs for non-royal kings. But still, the valley never explored well, because there is many tombs of kings that never discovered until now, like the tomb of Ramses VIII and the tomb of Thutmose II, and all the queens of Dynasty 18, they should be buried here. We have been excavating in this place since November 2007, and actually we came through a major discovery. You can see how really this area was completely covered, and our excavation revealed the beginning of the tomb. It shows stairs coming down, and that is the pit that can lead us to the entrance of a new tomb, KV64. And if we discover another intact tomb, the people will talk about this tomb all their lives.
Excavators from all over the world work in Egypt, and a large group of Americans have been excavating at the site of Abydos, the area sacred to the god Osiris.
We're here at South Abydos excavating the tomb of Senwosret III. He's a king of the 12th dynasty who built one of the most magnificent tombs in all of Egypt, a huge underground tomb in which he was probably buried. And we're excavating this tomb to recover evidence on the nature of the burial of this king. This place is a great laboratory for studying ancient Egypt. At this particular site, we have a royal tomb, we have a temple, we have cemeteries of local people, we also have a town. So many aspects of ancient Egypt are reflected in the remains here.
But excavating is only part of the ongoing work in Egypt. Conservation is at least as important. Pollution and other negative environmental conditions threaten Egypt's existing monuments and artifacts. As excavations reveal new finds, they too are subject to extensive damage. All of us now need to be concerned about the future of the past.
I sometimes close tombs. This is the only way to preserve them. Like I close the tomb of Seti. It's a unique tomb that cannot be repeated. And I would like to close the tomb of Tutankhamun. But this will come through the site management program that we are doing not only for the Valley of the Kings, but almost for every site in Egypt.